Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guests, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Today, we are going to be talking about communication. We are now in the year 2025, and boy, communication has really been off the charts. It's up, it's down, it's double. We feel like we're living in two different worlds. Everybody is saying, can't you hear me? Aren't you listening to me? Aren't you paying attention? What's the problem? I'm speaking. Aren't you getting the message? Truly, communication has really seemed as though we are listening to an AM and an FM station at the same time. There's a great disconnect. How can we go forward with this great disconnect when it seems like it's everybody in society? It's your relationships, it's at work, it's at home, it's your kids, it's on social media, it's on the television, and everyone is vying for, what are they vying for? Power, control, and to be heard. If we really truly look at that, we say, what is the point of communication then if everybody's going to be out there yelling and screaming? Exactly the point we'll be talking about today. How can you effectively communicate to actually get something done, to actually have an outcome, to actually listen and hear someone else, to maybe find empathy and compassion in what you're talking about and figure it out? People were not willing to figure it out. There were way too many space between each other. There's way too much time. There's way too much angst. So today, let's talk about how can we overcome that. My guest today is Chuck Wisner. His book is The Art of Conscious Conversations, Transforming How We Talk, Listen, and Interact. Chuck, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
It's great to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm so glad to have you, Chuck, because don't you think really communication is off the chain?
Yeah, it's certainly all there's some borders and boundaries and understandings missing. It's all over the map.
Yeah, it's really all over the map, and yet we're still expecting to come out with these great outcomes. We're expecting to be saved, to have a miracle, to have someone take care of them, safety and security. Isn't that what people are really looking for?
Yes, I think, and I might just add sort of blindly and unawares looking for that. And honestly, when we think about communicating and changing how we communicate, how we listen, how we interact, there's a lot of personal, individual work to be done to investigate bad patterns or old habits or automatic reactions,
Yeah.
So that's what one thing I try to do in the book is take things apart so we can put them back together in a better way.
Yeah. I've shared on the radio show for over 14 years now, pretty much our soul and our spirit, in other words, that the I am or the self, is like a ball of glitter inside. When we're born, we jump into a wetsuit. That's our human body. And then there's all of these badges stuck on the outside of the wetsuit. And what they are our experiences, our tether lines, things we've been through, our scars, our tears, our miracles, whatever they might be. And as I work so much with patients at end of life, it's all about what did they do in life. When you say, how was your life? It's what they did. And it's all about the obituary and how long and how great it can be. When truly, that's really looking at life through all of these experiences and expecting someone to hear you and see you, but you're really coming through all of this. Don't you think we need to start evaluating what we're really seeing things through?
Yes, I think one way I think about this is because my specialty and my work is around communication and conversation is we need to understand that all of our patterns and all of our desires and things and need to be wanting to be listened to and wanting to be right and all those things are conversational patterns that we just adopted unconsciously because of our family or our culture. And so I like to say we're like humans in conversation, like fish in water, because we have all these patterns, and then they become automatic, and then they feed our emotional reactions, which feeds our triggers, and it's quite an autopilot sort of way of operating the world until we come back inside and go, well, what do I really feel, and what can I really do better, and what can I really think differently? How can I really think differently?
I think it really came up, if we look back in the early 1900s, people always talked around the table. So the young kids would always hear the conversations of the elders, and they would kind of take those stories, and that would become their framework. In other words, if grandmother had it really hard, well, I'm gonna get out there. I know the world's really hard, but I'm gonna save it for the whole family. Do you know what I mean? So they kind of get stuck within these stories, and that story of the way they see the world, they really get stuck with, just as you shared in your book, you said, how judgmental am I? Well, we can look back at our elders, I'm almost 70, look back at my elders, and I can tell you how judgmental they were. They're very judgmental, but yet that was passed on, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as young children, I tell a story in the book where I grew up believing that I wasn't a big enough man.
Right.
Until... and that was because as a young child, my step-grandfather, who wasn't a very kind or enlightened human being, had his version, his opinion, his story about what a real man was. And I didn't measure up, so I was always told, don't cry. You come on, you have to, I didn't like skinning the deer. So everything I did, which was counter to his standard of what a big man is, I was told, no, you don't measure up. And what happened was, because I gave his voice authority, because I was a young kid, I don't know anything, I'm sort of learning the ropes, and that story stuck in my mind until I was able to bust it. And honestly, I was 30 years old until I busted that story.
Yeah.
So we live in stories, and some of them are wonderful, but luckily I had a grandmother that gave me the opposite. She adored the ground I walked on, so that was a balancing act, but otherwise I probably would have been more damaged from the grandfather's story.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I can think back on my ancestors also, and the comments, the way they interacted, it was violent, it was very negative. Nothing was ever a positive comment. However, I think if we look back, they were post-war, they were post-depression, they were all immigrants. I lived up in the north of Scranton area. Everybody was an immigrant from somewhere, from someplace, and everybody was trying to, quote, make their mark. And I think we see that even in business today. Everybody comes in and, hey, I've got a great idea, and they want to make their mark. They really want to, put their stamp on things. So I think there are many different ways to do that. And what you share in the book is how to be able to stop, breathe, and listen and pay attention to what's being said and set up some guidelines. That's the only way we can communicate, don't you think?
Yeah, and I mean, just on your ancestors and my grandfather, to be empathetic to them, he wasn't trying to be evil or trying to do me wrong. He was living out what he was living out what he was taught. What he thought was right, and how he thought the world should be, and how men should behave, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one piece. That brings a little bit of of forgiveness into the equation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But
it sure does, because you know what though? You know what though, Chuck? When we're going through it, there is nothing different. It's only in a reflection that we can see it. But here's the biggest problem, and I think this is where true wisdom comes in. Do we look back at the past with wise eyes or with these judgmental eyes? Because so many look back, oh, well, I didn't have this, I didn't have that. Can't you just honor the past and have reverence for it and say they absolutely did a wonderful job because they had to put food on the table, or they had to this, or they had to that? Don't you think?
Absolutely. They did their best based on their upbringing and their patterns of being in the world. So so for in my book, some folks get a little impatient with my book because literally the first 60 pages are about the major conversation called storytelling. Because we live in stories. We have stories about ourselves, like my not big enough man story. We have good stories also. But when we have, say, triggers or patterns of communicating that aren't helpful or friendly or empathetic, we have to look at those. We have to shine a light on those, not to judge ourselves, but to be able to go with curiosity, go, wow, I adopted that pattern of getting angry from my father. Now, that's not me, but that's a pattern I can investigate. And it's that willingness to investigate where we sort of like can see things rather than beating ourselves up. We can go, oh my gosh, I just got that from my pop, but I don't need to be that. I don't need to behave that way. What can I do differently? And that's hard work.
I think it's truly a lot of work, and I think that's the point of it, Chuck, because if we're thinking about it, I mean, I can distinctly remember I was working at a dentist's office in the 70s, and I was pregnant at the time, and we had hired an assistant to work with me, right? And they had called in, we're having an office meeting on a Friday, and I'm like, I can't come in. I'm like laying on the floor. I haven't been able to move because I was so violently ill. And, I would have to drive 25 miles to get to the office, blah, 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 and there was no way I could do it. Well, they said, if you don't come, you don't show up, you don't have a job, right? Well, of course, you think, well, I got to go because I need the job, right? So I went, and I can distinctly remember them saying, you don't play well in the sandbox. And I stood back for a minute, and I just said, oh, this is a game. We're just playing a game. So then you choose to play the game, and then when you're tired of the game, you leave. Because what I noticed is, and you wrote about it in your book several times, is that sometimes people don't want to stand up and do the job. People don't want to say they can or can't do the job. People expect others to do the job for them. I remember the girl distinctly. She just was, excuse the word, but she was lazy. She just didn't want to do it. She didn't want to push herself, She wanted to take her time. It's sort of like, when you're walking down behind them in the hall and they're going 2 miles an hour and you really need to go 10. Well, the qualification of the job was to go 10 miles an hour, not 2. Yeah. So, I think sometimes we look at it and we say, are we casting judgment, or are we saying this is how the job is to be? And that's where the misconstruing also happens.
Yes. So, and how I try to decipher or deconstruct every opinion we have, or rather every judgment we have, I talk about 4 elements. And one of the major elements of every judgment are standards. Now, standards is a big word. It means our morals. It means what we think is good and bad. It means what we like or we don't like. But literally every judgment is based on a standard we have. But often they feel so real to us that we forget that it's my standard, not the only standard, right? So but when we're in judgment and we can go, wait a minute, what am I basing this judgment on? Well, neighbors shouldn't behave that way. Bosses shouldn't talk that way. Husbands shouldn't treat women that way. And all of that, it might be right, it might be wrong, But what you're facing is the reality is that it's actually happening. And then your judgment is like bumping up against reality, and you can't see clearly then because you're blinded by your own standards.
But don't you think also, too, we have to understand we're going into a relationship or a communication or a job or a business or whatever it might be. We really need to set up the parameters, so to speak, in everything. Yeah. Because really, I mean, with this woman, it was like, no, I have a patient every 28 minutes. I can't wait for 2 miles an hour because then it won't happen, you know? Right. And I wasn't responsible for getting it in her head. I was responsible for showing her and teaching her, but I was not responsible for her accepting it and learning it. So I think sometimes we get stuck with that and we say, and a lot of people look at it from the outside and they say, oh, well, they think they're the leader and they cast out people before, blah, blah, blah. The answer is, but there are rules and there are parameters. And if you aren't able to be that, you have to accept and say, it's okay, I just don't fit it, instead of spewing back on the leader. Don't you think? That's right.
Yes, it's a double-edged sword because in the work I've done with teams, it's a very, very common problem. Why can't we hold people accountable? Accountability. My colleague isn't doing their share of the work. And the problem, if you back down, if you get under the problem and go, well, why can't we hold them accountable? Is because we've never set the right parameters, or we've never set the right rules, or we never said this is what good looks like, or this is what the job entails. So we have to set those things up, the expectations, the goals, and all these, and what good looks like, define it, so that then the person that is doing the job has a clear understanding, like you're talking about. Yep. Because if they have a clear understanding and I'm clear in presenting what they are, it's going to be a lot easier for me to instead of saying, oh, they're lazy or they're stupid or they won't do it. Right. It's a lot better for me to say, here are the standards we agreed to. Here's the parameters we agreed to. You're not living up to 1 and 2. You're doing okay with 3 and 4, but 1 and 2, what can we do to move them forward? Right. And that sounds so simple, yet it's missed all the time.
Oh, yeah, it is.
At work and at home. At work and at home.
Yeah. You know? But also, too, Chuck, can't we just say that it's okay to say a relationship doesn't work, and it's okay to let a friend go. It's okay to say people at work, it's time to move on, or it's okay for a business to close because it doesn't work. I think the difference is we keep trying so hard to say it must be this, instead of saying it doesn't. Give yourself a period of time and say, this doesn't work. Thank you. But then thank you for being my co-pilot at this time. However, I'm taking another road. That's being really, that's really being a quote, a man. That's being a leader. That's being a woman. That's being a professional. And that's the time to stand up, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I think the reason some people have trouble doing that, making that move, right? It takes a little courage. It takes a little self-awareness. It takes a time to come. But I think a lot of people can't do it because they're not in sync with reality. They keep thinking something should be a certain way, but it's not happening. But they can't accept that it's not happening, right? So if you can't accept it's not happening, you can't see the light and go, you know what, this isn't worth my effort. Or, you know what, it's time to turn the page. But you have to accept the reality that it's not working.
But, I think also, too, the idea is that the word failure, the word, not good enough, all of those have really been coming up lately. And people have really tried to appease people and say, oh, well, I see that you're really not feeling like you're not good enough. We're going to help you feel better. And it's like, oh, stop. It's really up to the individual person to be able to advance their own self, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to have a look, to have if we're always focused on someone else doing it for us or someone is telling us,
right,
that's external. We have to go inside and go, what's right for me? What's working for me? What isn't working for me? You know, even in working with teams, you know, it's very easy to talk about what do you want next year to look at? What's your future best desire for the future? And that's an easy conversation. But then when I turn it around and say, but what's your current state? What's the state of your what are you feeling? What are your emotions? What's upsetting you? What's not working? That's a harder conversation. But it's an important conversation, because only if you can do that can you see where the gap is between what you want and where you are. Then you can take action. That you can say, oh, I see. I've been blind to X, or I haven't been willing to accept Y, or, oh, I need to learn something new. So it's that sort of like tension that we have to be willing to go inside and then see the disconnect.
Yeah, you know, I look back on my life. It has been, just as yours, you know, about being a man, mine was, you don't belong here. I cannot tell you, I'm almost 70, more than 100 of times I've heard that my entire life. Yeah. Even the deans at my colleges for my 3 degrees, every single one of them had the same phrase, Jeanette, you need to drop out. You don't belong here. And I step back and I go, okay. Never did, of course, because I always knew that I was ahead of the time. You know, I knew something different, and I was secure in myself, knowing what it was, and I knew that wasn't going to stop, you know. And playing nice in the sandbox, I'll say, no, I don't, because it wasn't, that was not meant for me. Now, I think that's important to note, too, Chuck, is that some people, they keep trying to play in a sandbox, and I think there's something wrong with them. The answer is no. They're just not meant to play in the sandbox. They're meant to be leaders. They're meant to be forerunners. They're meant to be that person out there that's a little bit ahead, that has more experiential ideas, don't you think?
Yeah, and you know, but there's a piece to that I talk about in the book around creativity, in that what the gift you had in your situation was you were listening to your intuition. You were listening to your heart and your mind and your gut, not just your left brain, you know, get it right, do the job, you know, the rational, literal part of us. You were willing to listen to your intuition. No, this feels right to me. And that, in some ways, that's trained out of us.
That's right, yeah.
Because our culture is so left brain, so literal, rational focused. But we have to reacquaint ourselves with the ability to listen to our intuition and trust that, and sometimes make those hard decisions that you're talking about.
Yeah. I think also, too, that we're so afraid of that. And I think the idea is that it's not a mark on anyone. And I think that comes into ego. How is your ego doing today? And I don't even use the word ego. I guess, how is your inner self today? Are you confident? Yeah. Can you feel that you're going to be okay? Can you know what? Dust that off. That doesn't belong to me, you know? On your way home, you know, open the window and throw out the uniform. Do you know what I mean? Kind of idea, and let it go. But I think the idea is that so many say that I must have this, that, or the other, and they kind of mourn it and have a lot of grief around something that doesn't work, especially in relationships or work, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. If we are holding on to, again, I'll go back to the reality is it's not working, but you can't see that. So then what you're doing, instead of accepting the reality, you're just carrying that pain with you constantly because it didn't work out as you expected or as you wanted it to. And so, again, that acceptance is such a big piece of just being honest. Literally, sometimes you have to be brutally honest with yourself and say, okay, what's really what's happening here in front of me, and doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. What do I want? What's my heart telling me? That that's again. it's practice. It's work. We have to do the work. When I grew up in Pennsylvania as well, I was in York, Pennsylvania when I was a young man, and the good Pennsylvania people. But when I left, I was there, and I got turned on to architecture, and I decided to move to Boston to go to architecture school, and everyone around me said, "What are you talking about? You, an architect, architecture school?
Right.
What on earth? And I had to ignore those voices. But what I was doing was I had a real internal sense, a real draw to architecture that was so powerful that it could outweigh those other negative voices.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't you think also, too, the idea is that that's about commitment? You share in your book about what is commitment about. Commitment to make a decision, commitment to move through something. However, I think it's very important to understand you can commit to today and say that I'm committed to the job, but next week, next month, next year, you can shift. And you can honor that and say, I committed to it, but I am now in a different place, and I'd like to recommit, or I'd like to let this commitment go. That is the mark of a very awakened, a very conscious human being, don't you think?
That's right. And the thing I like to say about these commitment conversations is we want to make, which is really about the promises we make to take action with other people. You want to make good promises. You don't want to make, we culturally have a sloppy habit of making quick, we have a bad habit of making quick, sloppy promises. So you want to make good promises, but guess what? The moment you make that promise, the larger context of the world might change. A situation might change. Your experience might change. And are you willing to go, wait a minute, I did make that commitment, but the world around me has changed, I need to reconsider. And that too, like you said, that takes wisdom, and that takes someone that's awake and aware to be able to see and accept that the world has changed around you, and what you promised to do yesterday or the week before, you can no longer fulfill.
I think the most awesome job or communication or relationship is one that says we will evaluate and be open to whatever comes our way. And boy, when you get into one of those, you can just really flow with it, And you say we'll have hard times, and the hard times we will work through because we're both on the same thing. We're both having hard times. So sometimes the idea of, maybe our product isn't working. We can't sell it to market, so it must be that person at the desk's job. So let's just get rid of them. And then they find out that it's not really them. It's everything else, or it might be the product or whatever it might be. Or how about when they start seeing things on social media and they're saying, that's reflecting back on this one or that one. And then they start eliminating people. When in essence, I think a lot of people, let's talk for a little bit about outcomes and about expectations, because outcomes, we're expecting something, but it's almost based on this moment. It's not always based on the progression to get there. In other words, you have an idea, you build a product, that's this moment, and you're projecting your outcome. When you get to the outcome that you're at, it may be the same or it may be different. And that's when you can reevaluate. Yet people really get messed up in between, don't you think?
Yeah, because I think, their story is it has to be this way, or this is, or their ego is attached to the outcome. Yeah. And so when it shifts, if your ego is driving the boat or driving your thinking, you can't see clearly. You can't go, wait a minute, things changed. I need to change gears, or I need to reconsider. And that's how people get stuck, because we get we get attached to those outcomes and those stories about what should happen, and then God's laughing at us, going, "Oh yeah, but watch this,"
Right.
Yeah.
But don't you think that's also true, Chuck, when you get really resistant employees because they'll say, well, I guess we have to do it his way, or in a relationship they say, oh, well, I'm giving up part of myself now because I want to stay in the relationship, but, they're not going to listen to me, or it's not going to work out my way, so they feel less than. And I think either way, you're kind of in a losing battle, don't you think?
That's right. And the part that you just talked about is very much a judgment of self. You keep whittling away at your confidence and your core self, for the sake of not speaking about what you need or what you want, because you want to stay in the relationship or you want the job or whatever. So if you keep whittling away, you'll never find that center where you can go, wait a minute, this doesn't work for me. And in some ways, I also talk, besides standards in the book, I talk about authority and power issues.
Right.
Because every conversation we have, every interaction we have, like it or not, there are power issues. We give different people's voices different levels of authority. One friend might say something to you and you just laugh. Another friend, someone else, a better friend, might, not a close friend, but a friend might say something and you bristle because you're giving their voices different levels of power. And so that's part of the equation. And often we don't have control over that because if we're in a hierarchy of a business, part of the hierarchy is, there's levels, there's people that have more stripes than you. But you have to be aware of that because that can actually guide you to what conversation or what interaction you might want to have when things aren't going your way.
You always see that in relationships too. It depends on who's the breadwinner, which one's going to be have that other hierarchy. Or you see it even with siblings and stuff. You see that all the time. I know for myself, granted, I've got 3 degrees. Okay, so what? It's not a big deal to me. However, I was speaking to a relative at one time, and they said, well, when you came back from college, you thought you knew it all. And I'm going, well, I'm really sorry. What do you want me to And then I stopped. I said, no, I'm not sorry. That is what your perception and your issue is. It has nothing to do with me. Right. And I had to step back. Right. So I think the idea is sometimes we apologize a lot when we're setting up companies, setting up relationships, setting up businesses. Don't you think?
Oh yeah, and the beautiful part of what you just did was to realize that when someone is judging you or someone is saying, "Oh, you just turned into a snoot," or "You're just a smarty pants," or whatever. Right. It's always the voice that I keep in my mind says more about them than it says about me. It says more about their view of the world, their stories about how the world should be working or how this person should be behaving than it does about you. And so we get to give it. I like to think there's three moves you can make when someone comes at you with a judgment that is harsh. You can. The easy unconscious pattern is you let it in and it hurts. You just let it into your system, in your mind, in your heart, and you suffer because you're going, oh wow, they don't like me, or she might be right, or whatever. But we let it in. Right. And I like to say, if you realize it's their judgment, it's their opinion, it's their standard, catch it before you let it in. Catch it and go, wait a minute. Yeah. I can choose to learn from this. I can give their voice power. I can give their voice no authority. I can give it back to them and say, I think this belongs to you. I might be interested in knowing more, and I might not be interested in more. And the other option is you get it, you catch it, and you realize that it doesn't even deserve your energy, and you give it to the winds. You give it to the gods. You just throw it away. So it's, that takes a little bit of effort and a little bit of consciousness to go, wait a minute, I don't have to respond. I don't have to go on automatic pilot. I don't have to get triggered. This is yours. and you get to choose whether you want to learn from it or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You know, when I see it, I always say when you're having a conversation, you know how you stand face to face. And I'll say if you have a sense, I'm a medium, so I get all these senses all the time, that something's going to come at you, I turn to the side, which now makes a corner, so to speak, you see, with your physical body. You turn to the side and let it spew past you. And I never let anything come in. And once I turn to the side, it's like, boy, energetically, 99% of them can go right past you.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? And then you turn around and you go, whoop. Yeah, and then my answer is always, after they say it, I say, whoo, what was that? And it kind of, it disassociates them. It kind of startles them. It triggers them. But it also challenges them. And it's like you can't even engage after that. It's sort of like they're going to go off in a huff. Guarantee it. But guarantee has nothing to do with you.
That's right. It was them projecting onto you their story, their righteousness, and whatever. But so your ability, I love that image of you sort of stepping aside and letting it whoosh by you. little
just
gale
turn to the side.
By. So, woohoo, what was that? Good thing it didn't enter in. So that's great.
Yeah.
And it's the same in conversation. I like to use the metaphor of we can enter a conversation with a fist, and then like we've all been in these awful meetings, whether it's home or work. You enter, it has to be this way. I know what we're doing. I know it has to be this way. And someone else comes in and they're in that fist, and we're going at each other. We're boxing with our fists. When in fact, what we can do, if we can be humble and a little vulnerable, open our fist and explain, I have a position, but here's how I'm thinking, why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking. Here are my desires. Here are my goals. Here's my standard. Here's what I'm really concerned about. That's a very open position. Doesn't mean you have to give up your perspective or give up your whatever your thinking is about that particular issue, but you're willing to be a little more exposed to go, let me explain to you how I'm thinking and why I'm thinking this way. And that is vulnerable, but you know what? That also is in a way that opens the space up in a conversation so other people can do the same.
Don't you think so also, too? We can't be the collectors of the smudge. That's what I call it.
Yeah.
And, we can't be dragging around with bags of everything that people are spewing out. You see that in offices a lot, or businesses. There's always somebody who's the punching bag for everybody else. And it's like, oh, my Lord, this has got to stop, And those people end up either sick, dying early, or just plain checking out, don't you think?
Yeah, or depressed, and they they're letting all that in, and it's very negative energy.
Yeah.
It's very toxic energy, right? So it's again a double-edged sword. Those people to really check what they're doing, be aware enough that they can see the harm they're doing, and the person that's receiving needs to wake up enough to go, wait a minute, I don't need to take that.
Yeah.
And maybe if they wake up, maybe it points of, I'm getting the hell out of here. This job isn't right for me, like you said earlier.
Right.
So I say, I think in the commitment conversation, we're addicted to yes when someone asks us to do something because we want to be polite and just sort of please people. But no has to be part of our vocabulary. We have to only to protect ourselves. To say no. Sometimes I need to say no. I can't do it. No, that's I can't do it because of these reasons. Or no, I'm not competent to do it. I need to learn something. I can have someone else do it. So it's that ability to protect ourselves and have that sort of boundary where we can be the ones to push back and go, no, I'm not taking that on, or nope, I can't commit to that for good reason.
Yeah. I think also, too, in closing, we have to touch on the factor that we cannot control people. We cannot change them. We are not responsible for their path in life. So whatever anyone has, what they're going through, whatever it is totally theirs. I think back, my husband, I swear, I'm this type of person, we had kids, stuff, I took care of everything, and all of a sudden it was like, is there any reason you need to just drop your stuff there? Like, the dishes by the dishwasher were less than an inch. I took a picture one day. He had put them on top of the dishwasher, and I'm going, but wait a minute, it's only an inch to open the door and put them in. And there was no way he was going to change, just absolutely no way. So I had two choices. Yeah. I can accept it, or I can leave it, or I can do it myself. And then the answer is, well, sometimes I'll do it myself, but I stopped getting annoyed by it and said, I'm going to leave it there. And I didn't get annoyed by it. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to walk past it. I'm going to leave it there because I choose not to do it today. I choose not to do what I had. Your stuff.
Right, and you're stepping out of that codependency. Right? Yeah. You're stepping out and saying, no, I'm not going to do, we've been doing a tango. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to do a boogie or I'm going to do a waltz, And then, guess what? When you change the dance, he has to go, oh, I see. I can rethink this too. My wife and I have a joke. We have a joke early in our marriage. We've been married 42 years. Early in our marriage, we get frustrated because we have a dinner party. She loves to clean up and go to bed and wake up with the kitchen spick and span. And we joke that that's called her. She likes to go to bed as a maid and wake up like a queen. And I was just the opposite. I say, I'm really tired. I had a drink. I'm going to bed. I'll deal with this in the morning. And then I get up in the morning and have to clean up. So I like to go to bed as a king and wake up as a servant. And so we realized that was nobody's right or wrong. We realized that was just our pattern, our standard, our pattern of what our preferences. And so instead of it being conflictual, it became a lot lighter. And sometimes I could say, you know what, let's just go to bed. I'll take care of it in the morning. I know you don't want to be cleaning in the morning, but I'll do it. Or I'll say, okay, you go to the kitchen, I'll put all the food away, you do the dishes, and we'll go to bed happy. So, but, instead of it becoming a fight around who's right and who's wrong, it became it became something we could talk about, and it brings lightness into it, right?
Yeah. Well, he still doesn't do it, though. And, it could be days he won't put the stuff in. But I had to be okay with it. So I think that's the idea is that you have to decide, are you going to carry the anger and the angst, or are you going to leave it alone? Exactly. Because when you start carrying the anger and the angst, you end up regretting or being angry at another person or having all kinds of nasty stuff around you. You know what I mean? So
or it's living inside your body somehow.
Yeah. And also, too, I think the idea is that you start spewing out and blaming other people, too. That blaming, well, why can't you do it? It's been 3 days and you haven't put the dishes away. And it's like, you know what? I'm just not even going to go there. I'm just going to walk past them as if they don't even exist because it wasn't my choice for the day. But then I think also, too, like when people leave a job or when they have other employees, they're trying to seek them out or get revenge or they're trying to make them look bad or whatever. And the idea is really, what's the point? Right?
Right, exactly. Well, and the other thing about what you are doing with your husband is your willingness to realize that it's not your job to change him.
Right.
No.
Right.
Because if we're saying, why can't he just put the damn things in the dishwasher? You're basically saying he's not doing it my way. He should do it my way. But that just fills all that tension and creates all that conflict. But when you go, hey, not my job to change him, that's a little bit of a step into being more free of the angst. So that's a good example.
It's a tough place to be sometimes because you're like, all these dang dishes are still here. But I go out and do my other stuff. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, it wasn't on my thing today to do that. So, and I'm okay
right.
with that. I think, Chuck, today we talked about were a lot of ideas and stories that people could try in their life, because also many times people are saying, I don't know what works anymore because I'm up against the wall. And your book is really something that will help us to be able to say, maybe there is a way through the wall, around it, or maybe there shouldn't be a wall, right?
Right. Can we break through it?
Right.
Can we walk away from it? Right. Or can I investigate my reaction to see maybe I'm part of the problem? So, there's so many good tools to get us to turn from blame and shame and things to look inside and wake up a little bit. So I like to think of because we grow up in conversations with that awareness, like what I tried to do in the book is create a little understanding of the DNA of conversation, how they work, why they work, and why they don't work. So we have choices. We can actually look and go, oh, I don't have to think that way, or I don't have to react that way. There's practices, and I like that word too, because there's no magic switch to change a bad habit or change a bad communication style. We have to see it, we have to acknowledge it, and then we have to say, okay, what can I try differently? And that takes time.
Yeah, it does. But everybody has to be willing. And you know what? If you're not willing, say, it's not something am I choosing, and walk away.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Chuck, it was such a pleasure to have you with us here today. Could you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
Sure. My website is chuckwisner.com. And just there's a way to sign up with your email, and you can get a free PDF of the introduction. I'm on social media. I'm a little bit of a lull right now because I got hacked in the meta universe. But anyway, which is not fun. My Instagram account is and my LinkedIn is Chuck_Wisner. So I've been posting, and like I said, I'm in a bit of a quiet moment, but that's all there. And, on my website, there's places where you can write me an email, check in if you're interested in having a conversation or you have a question for me, feel free to do that.
Very good. Well, Chuck, it was such a pleasure to have you with us here today. I think we truly shared a lot of ideas and tips because, boy, things haven't been working out so well, and a lot of people are seeking that. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jeanette.
If you'd like to find out more information about Chuck Wisner, again, the book is The Art of Conscious Conversations, Transforming How We Talk, Listen, and Interact. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to his website for more information. It is just about saying, I'm really up against the wall. I feel like everything I'm saying is just coming back and hit me in the face. Yep. Everybody's there. Don't worry. We are all experiencing that these days. We always have to just stop and breathe and say, do I wish to listen? Do I care to listen? Am I wanting to listen? Or is this something that I'm really ready to engage in? A lot of times you could say no. Sometimes you could say yes. And very many times you can say, I invested in this process. Let's give it a go. And really try to work out your conversations. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher. Until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit drjeanettegallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.